What we do know is that next the Dragonborn set his eyes towards Dragon's Reach in Whiterun to challenge Odahviing and entrap him. Jarl Balgruuf had prepped the balcony and readied his men for the Dragon Call. This was going to be tricky because the Dragonborn needed to bait the creature into coming inside of the hall, directly below the harness. See, Dragon's Reach is famous in Skyrim, but it was the place where Olaf One-Eye, High King of Skyrim at the time, captured the dragon Numinex. But this actually happened hundreds of years after the Dragon War, after Alduin had been sent forward into the future and the dragons defeated and mostly killed. This means that virtually no dragon that exists today is aware that this trap even exists, whereas MrRhexx does, since he lived in Skyrim at the top of the throat of the world this entire time. This made it a little bit simpler than it could have been, as Odahviing pushed through in his anxiousness to fight the Dragonborn, and in the end, got caught in the harness. Interestingly enough, MrRhexx's conclusion on the state of dragonkind after Alduin's defeat proved certain, as Odahviing exclaimed there was indeed doubt between the ranks of Alduin's dragons. They questioned Alduin's voice, and in response, his authority to rule over them. This, combined with the fact that it is very difficult to find something dragons hate more than being incarcerated, allowed the Dragonborn to form a kind of a pact with this Dova. In exchange for information on where Alduin was located, then would the dragon be spared the consumption of his soul. A deal made rather quickly. It had seemed that Alduin had escaped into Sovngarde of all places, the godly realm of the ancient Nords, their heaven. Spectacular really that the power of Alduin seemingly knew no bounds, and allowed him the privilege of not just entering the sacred realm of divinity, but the reason he was there in the first place wasn't to actually run from the Dragonborn, but to devour the spirits of the dead, a process that granted him vigor and strengthened him. Odahviing had shared that the door that Alduin was using to pass through these realities was found atop an ancient dragon cult temple called Skuldafn, a place only accessible by dragons, since it was found atop the eastern mountains and not accessible by foot, and hence a new deal was made. If the Dragonborn released Odahviing and allowed him to go free, then he would show the Dragonborn the location and personally fly him there. We are finally entering the last chapter of the Dragonborn's story. With no power left for him to obtain, with no information left for him to gather, all that was left was for him to make his way through the temple, to find his courage, and to fight through the hordes of dragons and draugrs, all the way through to the very top where the door to Sovngarde was located. And it wasn't easy. The draugrs found in this temple were by far the strongest that the Dragonborn had fought so far, for they were favored by the dragons. They were granted the power of the voice by their dragon overlords for their servitude and loyalty, which made them extreme combatants. The dragons were ferocious, for they were defending their god and their leader. But successfully, the Dovahkiin persevered. He found at the very perch that the last dragons in servitude to Alduin had relented their assault, for they had understood the power of his voice and his unquestionable prowess versus that of Alduin. His last challenger was, in fact, the leader of the complex, not a dragon, and more than just a draugr, an entity that we would call a dragon priest. If you remember from earlier in the story, the dragon priests were the leaders of the human kingdoms of Skyrim and Admora back in the days before days. Since the dragons enjoyed being superior but did not enjoy the ruling and the political aspects that were attached to it, they allowed certain loyal humans to rule in their stead. These humans were granted enormous power through magical items crafted by the very dragons. Sometimes these would come through armor and staffs, but most of the time they would come through dragon masks. These artifacts of untold power gave the dragon priest the ability to govern with an iron fist. Nakreen, the dragon priest, had been commanded by Alduin to protect the gate into Sovngarde, but he was no match for the Dragonborn. Upon using his key staff to open the portal, the Dragonborn had accessed the one place where every single Nord wanted to go to, the Nordic heaven of Sovngarde. Noble Nord, remember these words of the Hoarfather. Fear not the spectre of death, for he is the herald of glory and your guide to great Sovngarde. The Dragonborn wasn't in Skyrim anymore. He wasn't in Tamriel anymore, not even on the same planet. He had traveled through realities and entered the magical realm of Aetherius, known as the Immortal Plane. It was the birthplace of all the gods, where Magica, the magic this story originates from. It is the place where it is believed that all the souls of the dead come from, and the location of all the different heavens. In this case, he was in a plane created specifically by Shor, who is known as the human god, an ancient god who physically walked the earth of Tamriel and fought in actual real wars with humans, but was eventually defeated by the other gods and killed. He made a covenant where he would reward the descendants of his warriors with eternal joy and merriment for having fought by his side during the beginnings of time. Those descendants were the ancient Nords, so as long as those Nords kept the traditions of fighting for what they believed in and dying for their causes, they would be rewarded richly by their patron by coming here.
Turn back, traveler. Terror waits within this mist. Many have braved the shadowed vale, but vain is all courage against the peril that guards the way. Near Giant's Gap, in the gloom before dawn, we marched unsuspecting into the Imperial's trap. Then we stood and fought, our shield wall defending, until by dawn's light the Legion's ranks wavered. But I never knew if Night's End brought victory. A swift flying arrow to Sovngarde carried me.
However, things were not as they seemed when the Dragonborn walked through these sacred grounds. Alduin had created a mist, a special magical mist that entrapped the souls of the dead that wandered into it. It would prevent the souls from ever finding the end of the path, the entrance to Shor's halls, and it would prevent them from escaping as well. The perfect spell for Alduin to devour them, one by one, as they laid there helplessly. The Dragonborn, however, wasn't dead, so the magics of this mist did not affect him like it did to them, and he found the way to the end. See, he couldn't fight Alduin under these conditions, as the mist prevented the Dragonborn from seeing the sky, and without seeing Alduin he couldn't fight him. But not all was lost, for Shor's halls lay there at the end of the Whalebone Bridge, a place filled with heroes of old and ancient Nordic warriors. Warriors that the Dragonborn surmised would be more than happy to fight once more for the salvation of their brethren. An old champion of old called Soon guarded the bridge, however. He who was known to be the Thane of Old Shore when he was a god and walked the earth. He is venerated as the god of trials against adversity in the ancient Nordic pantheon, represented as the whale god. His job to test the mettle of every single Nord that wants to pass through the bridge in order to get to heaven. It is believed that this was one of the unique moments in the Dragonborn's life when he was truly tested, outside of his encounters with Alduin. In any case, Tsune recognized the brawn of the Dovahkiing and allowed him entrance. Now, inside of what is called Halls of Valor, the spirits of the Nords dance and sing and eat and fight for all eternity. The magics of the hall prevent anyone inside from feeling boredom, as well as dulling the pain of combat, making this place the perfect eternity for a Nord. Now, most Nordic heroes that you can find mentioned within Skyrim can be found here, including those from books and stories. However, their stories did not affect that of the Dragonborn. Instead, our story will focus on a few selected individuals, the first being Ysgramor. See, everything that means to be a Nord basically comes from this one individual. He was the main Nordic leader to sail from the ancient continent of Anmora to actually settle in Skyrim, which many people attribute as the first man who actually set foot in the whole of Tamriel. He also was the inventor of writing for the humans, transcribing Nordic speech into runes for everyone to understand and read. There is literally no more famous and legendary Nordic warrior than Ysgramor, and he was the first one to welcome the Dragonborn into Shor's Hall. It had seemed that there were indeed warriors capable and willing to bring the fight to Alduin, in order to safeguard all the souls that were being devoured by him. These warriors turned out to be the very same heroes from old who battled Alduin back in the Dragon War. Those who actually ended up inadvertently teaching the Dragonborn the Dragon-Dren shout. Gormlaith Goldenhilt, Hakon One-Eye, and Feldir the Old. They had failed at actually defeating Alduin in the past, and using an Elder Scroll, they sent him into the future. But now that Alduin was at their doorstep in heaven, it was their time to end their failure once and for all. The mist still proved to be a problem for these warriors, as fighting Alduin within it would be a deadly proposition. But now, instead of simply having the Dragonborn being the only user of the voice, we had 4. And with their power, they cleared the sky of this mist. Their combined voice was stronger than Alduin's, as they screamed at each other back and forth. Alduin convoking the mist over and over while the tongues shouted it away. Exhausted and without no other recourse, the dragon swooped in, and combat began.
For Skyrim! For sure!
One of Alduin's strongest abilities is called Meteor Storm, a special shout only Alduin seems to know and be able to learn, which summons enormous meteors from the sky to destroy the earth. It is believed that a version of this spell is what Alduin uses in order to completely swallow and destroy the world. Avoiding these meteors while also dodging the incredible fires of Alduin's maw and keeping the other tongues alive was more than even the Dovahkiin could handle. As the battle progressed, the tongues fell under the might of Alduin, leaving his destruction solely at the hands of the Dragonborn. But at the very doors of heaven, in the sanctious realm of the gods, in front of every conceivable hero known to man, the Dragonborn slew the Devourer of Worlds and ended his realm of tyranny before it even began. So, what happened to the Dragonborn, you ask? Did he stay in heaven? Did he return to live the rest of his life in peace, knowing he had done his duty? Did he rule Skyrim as the new High King? Or did he join the Dark Brotherhood, a clan of murderers for pay? Well, there are a few things we do know. The Dragonborn was sent back to the world of the living by Tsune, where he belonged, at least until the moment of his death. Sent all the way to the top of the throat of the world, where all the dragons were perched, not only to pay homage to the Dragonborn, but to celebrate of Alduin's defeat.
Sorot fur Kanaran. Vakin los Oktavakrid.
Alduin is dead, they screamed. We are free, they clamored. Happy for Alduin's death they all were, except for one, the one maybe you wouldn't expect not to be. The betrayer, the one who helped us actually achieve this goal. MrRhexx.
So, it is done. Alduin, Dilon. The eldest is no more. He who came before all others and has always been. Happy? No, I am not happy. Zeh mahi lost ondul bormahu. Alduin was once the crown of our father Akatosh's creation. You did what was necessary. Alduin had flown far from the path of right action in his pachlok, in the arrogance of his power. But I cannot celebrate his fall. Zutiraz ach ochma. He was my brother once. This world will never be the same. I am glad you believe that. At least it will continue to exist. Griklos line. Even I cannot see past time's ending to what comes next. Nid korav zing dinos ketid. We must do the best we can with this world. But I forget myself. Crosis, solos midfadon. Melancholy is an easy trap for a Dova to fall into. You have won a mighty victory, Shahroch Kongrach. One that will echo through all the ages of this world for those who have eyes to see. Savor your triumph, Dovahkiin. This is not the last of what you will write upon the currents of time. Goran, I feel younger than I have in many an age. Many of the Dovahe are now scattered across Kizal. Without Alduin's lordship, they may yet bow to the Vasen, rightness of my Thum. But willing or no, they will hear it. Fare thee well, Dovahkiin.
When this story is told, there's always one detail that gets forgotten. In fact, the most important detail. The Dragonborn did indeed defeat Alduin, more so than that he killed Alduin, but he did not absorb Alduin. Many believed, including yourself possibly, that the one edge that the Dragonborn had over this demigod that the other tongues didn't was the fact that he could permanently end Alduin, forevermore, by absorbing him. But when the time was right, when Alduin's flesh exploded and burned, his soul actually flew into the heavens, back to Aetherius. The Dragonborn did not absorb him. Now, that was possibly the will of the gods. Maybe one day he will come back to truly end the world. I mean, the world does have to end at some point, right? But what about the story? Where does it actually end? What did he end up doing after all that? Well, some say a new Elder Scroll resurfaced. One bearing portents of darkness. A world without the sun, where vampires ruled over all. But that is a story for another day. The patrons for this story were Dylan Baker, Toby Oliver, and Alex Fitchie, whom I thank for helping support me in this quest. Like them, join me in Patreon and help me bring these stories to life like many of you already do. This was the tale of Elder Scrolls Skyrim as seen by the eyes of the Dragonborn, a mortal blessed by the gods with the soul and mind of a dragon, in his quest to save the world against Alduin, the World Eater. Meet you again in the next tale.